So what I propose to do is share with you a little bit of an overview of what we've been doing in the engineered stone and the compliance activities that have been occurring in that area. One of the key focuses that we've been looking at is building on the awareness campaign. I'm sure you've all, Pam put the hands up at the beginning of the session. We're trying to build upon that, making sure that the message is getting out more broadly in regards to making people aware of the hazards that come with being exposed to silica. One of the key issues that we've identified is it's generated a truckload of reactive work for us. We're getting phone calls to the people who are, the guy next door's generating all this dust because he's chopping bricks and a whole lot of stuff in that area. So it is having an impact. It means that we're off focusing on a whole range of different areas in regards to trying to make sure that the exposure and the controls that PCBUs are putting in place are effective as part of that process. Whilst we're talking about the natural stone industry and the things that come from that, this is on top of our normal compliance activities. You know, we deal with mining areas, we deal with quarries, we deal with a whole range of areas that deal with silica, and what we've seen is recently is an increase in regards to the manufactured stone area, but also given that we do have limited resources, we've got to prioritise where the problems are, and hence the reason why we're tending to put a little bit more attention into these areas. You know, WorkSafe is in the minimum compliance business. It's about making sure that the minimum safety standards are being applied across all workplaces, and that we're not about negotiating the safety standards as part of that process. It's a strong legislative basis on which we seek to make sure that all workplaces are complying. The way we go about it is certainly we apply our tools to change behaviour within the workplace, but also where we identify serious problems, we do take enforcement action. There are processes in place as part of that, so it's not just a general threat. There are examples of where we are taking enforcement actions against PCBUs that have seriously breached the legislation in regards to exposing their workers. Focusing on the control measures is the key area from our perspective. What we're trying to do is minimise that exposure. Prohibiting dry cutting, it's a no-no. You would have heard from the previous speakers, obviously the exposure is so much greater through dry cutting. Controls around looking at the water dampening, and the tools that were shown earlier on today are all key areas where we're trying to make sure that workplaces have adequate controls to ensure that exposure is kept to a minimum. Where there is exposure, there's health monitoring being undertaken to workers. So it's one of the things that we are really quite keen on is that you do not, once we identify these problems in the workplace, these are not negotiables. You will get notices, you will get action taken in regards to making sure that you are protecting your workers, and that is certainly something that we are very keen on making sure is occurring within the workplaces. Provision of information, training and instruction to workers is also part of it. One of the more disturbing things we see are a lot of workers who are less inclined to want to wear or apply the controls within the workplace. They're reluctant to do that. We've heard about the potential health risks that come with exposure to silica, and there's an education process that we're trying to kick off through our awareness campaign, but also all PCBs have that obligation to be educating, training and instructing their workers so that they're aware of the hazards that come with the process. And also, as part of our activities, we're making sure that the PPE that's provided is the appropriate PPE. We are going through the fit testing process, that the people are making sure that the controls that are put in place are effective as part of that process. Just a quick snapshot of some of the things that we've been focusing on, or the outcomes that we've identified. So working with the industry, trying to get them to manage the risks associated with the control exposure. Our feeling is that generally the the level of compliance is quite low, and there is quite a lot of high non-compliance in certainly a lot of businesses that we're dealing with as part of the places that we are going to. So that education process is quite important, but also the requirements around making sure that the appropriate controls are put in place, and that goes directly to if you are using silica within a workplace. The first question that our guys or the inspectors will ask is, what's your exposure level? So then you're going into monitoring, assessing, getting the hygienists involved. All the people you've spoken about this morning are very much, or this afternoon, are very much focused on the process that you will need to go through in order to demonstrate that you're satisfying your obligations as part of the legislation. Just by way of example, we ran a small program across about 20 PCBUs. 7 prohibition notices were issued with regards to dry cutting, 33 improvement notices ranging across a whole range of areas from PPE, health monitoring, noise, autometric testing, cleaning, whole range of areas. Lots of areas where PCBUs need to be really quite a lot more active in regards to what they're doing. One of the other challenges that we're identifying is that where health monitoring or where a PCBU has been controlling their silica exposure risks, when we've gone through the process of monitoring the environment and they've come in under the 0.1 milligrams per cubic metre, with the standard potentially moving to 5, they're nowhere near that 0.05%. So there are going to be some significant challenges for PCBUs moving forward in regards to satisfying the requirements as the exposure standard is reduced. So looking forward, from our perspective, we'll continue to focus on high-risk industries. We're also looking to make sure that, and what we're seeing is a product of the awareness campaign, is a move across into other more broader industries, construction industry, mining industry, those sort of areas. Wherever silica is present, then we're starting to get more and more active compliance or active activity in that area, I should say. We're also mentioning as one of the challenges, obviously cutting and grinding is continuing to be a problem. So the equipment that we've seen this afternoon are a good investment. Making sure you've got the right equipment, it's kept in good condition, it's checked on a regular basis, are all critical things that we'll be requiring of PCBUs to demonstrate that they're actually managing their silica risks. And certainly we're operating, we're promoting and enforcing the reduction of the new standard. So they're the areas that we're embracing as we move forward. And the challenge for PCBUs is to obviously satisfy the minimum requirements and then be able to make sure that those systems continue and maintained at an appropriate level. So takeaways from my perspective is identify if you have any silica risks, measure your exposure levels, determine if your controls are adequate, consult and train your workers to make sure that you're actually managing those risks, keep your workplaces clean and free from a build-up of dust, and monitor your workplace exposure standards and medical condition of your workers, and keep good records. I'm done.
Any questions at all for Brad? Yep.
Just from a regulator perspective, would you find it to be an advantage for silica dust and silica work to move into high-risk construction category, as like asbestos is currently now, to help drive the awareness? I know it's probably more of a higher level Safe Work Australia type of question and scenario. But I think that as far as getting more site-specific documentation of where this actually matters, and I think all of this stuff is really good, but I don't think it's saturating down to where it actually needs to be. And from a principal contractor perspective, we see that when it's high-risk construction work, we get better knowledge, better understanding, better input, and we actually focus more on the stuff that's happening on site, driven by the regulatory requirements of being high-risk construction work like asbestos. So if we go and pull asbestos out of the hospital, we've got really good stuff. If we get the tiler coming in to do a heap of tiles on any of our projects, we get a very average swims, as you know, it's not high risk construction work, so under the code and under the regulations, we don't require a swims, but we get one anyway. So, but he's still working with silica, he's still doing potential cutting and things like that. So I guess from my perspective, I see an advantage for it to move into that category of high risk construction work.
I think it certainly would offer some advantages. The other side of moving into that area is that it adds an additional cost burden to the industry. But also from the point of view that if you've got a business that is actively managing its silica risk, then it should be able to be managed in the current environment. One of the things I gave a presentation to an HAA, and I said, if you're going to play in the silica space, do it properly or get out of it. You can't mess around and go halfway through. And what we're seeing is people who have been in this area and haven't actually embraced the recognition of the fact that this is a product similar to asbestos and it needs to be managed accordingly. Yeah, I take your point, it may be managed or better managed by moving into a high risk type activity. Not really a decision that I can make, but certainly that may be one way of pushing it. But a lot depends on how industries respond. We've got 150 people here or thereabouts today. People are aware of the issues that come with it. It's a matter of how people respond when they go back to the workplace, and if they recognise and go through that assessment process, the process that we have actually will apply quite well to silica, or works quite well for silica. It's only the individual application by those individuals. Now, if it means that you, as a principal, can put greater pressure on these smaller businesses to make sure the standards are maintained, it's certainly something worth entertaining.
Yeah, we certainly do that. I guess I could probably see some boundaries when WorkSafe come to site and they want to monitor something to do with just use tiling, for example, where it's not high risk construction work, and you want to enforce what they're doing, and you may ask for their swims, their safe work method statement to identify and to demonstrate how you've done that risk assessment, because there's lots of language here talking about risk assessments, and I can pretty much guarantee that there would be a lot of construction sites around that are doing working in silica dust where there's no risk assessment done.
And I think it may well be the industry as a whole. I know I've had some conversations with some of the larger organisations that the industry need to come together to work out what is their response to this increased risk level that comes with silica, and how the industry going to respond. And certainly, if the industry grabs hold of that and wants to take a move in that way, I'm pretty sure that WorkSafe would enjoy being part of that process and help pull that together.
Okay. One more question?
Yeah, just in relation to identifying the hazards, there was a couple of products that we work with all the time that haven't been mentioned: synthetic mineral fibre insulations and grinding and cutting fiberglass. And maybe it's a hygienist question, I'm not sure, but what are the silica hazards associated with those products?
Crystalline silica is only associated when those sort of materials have been exposed to very high temperatures over long periods of time.
So in processing plant, when we're ripping off insulation of hot processing plant?
Yeah, it's possible. You just have to look at it. You have to monitor, and assess it.
Yeah, get the experts, the hygienists in to give you the advice in regards to identifying that.
Well, any other questions? I think we're just about, one more very quick question.
Just in relation to silica, of course, the biggest challenge we have as a subcontractor is the principal builders driving price down, and then other competitors that might not operate at the same level we do, as an example, win work. So how do you go with that challenge? How do you control that challenge?
So, if I understand, the issue is that those who are doing it properly adds an additional cost, which then makes the...
Not so much an additional cost, but the guys that aren't doing it properly can come in cheaper.
Cheaper.
Because their vacuums, as an example, might be less expensive.
And that's a consistent problem across all industries where you've got undercutting happening. Our role is to make sure that we try and ensure that minimum standards are applied across the board. I think the principal has an obligation in that arrangement to make sure that the chief isn't the decision point. It's a matter of making sure that the people who they choose to engage do actually have the appropriate policies and procedures and are doing the risk assessments and the controls are in place to deal with that. Yes, I would like to say I've got 100 inspectors and I can be out there making sure everybody's doing everything that they need to be. We don't have that, we're very limited in what we can do. But I think the key issue is that the people who are doing the work and taking on and engaging the subbies in that space need to make sure that they are not just looking at price, but they are also looking at the controls that are put in place to manage those risks.
Right, I think we'll need to wrap up now just to make sure that everybody can leave on time. Thank you very much for your attendance today. I hope you enjoyed the session. I know that it was jammed packed with lots of information, but we have recorded the session, so you will be able to go back and have a look again if you've missed anything or want to perhaps pass it on to others to take some learnings from the session today. Don't forget to fill out your survey before you go, and for those wanting the CBD points, there's a small test at the back and there's a black box to the rear of the room where you can leave that. Thank you to all our speakers. I'm sure you'll agree that they are fantastic presentations, and I wish you all well. Safe journey home, and hope to see you at the next Better Work Tas event. Make sure that you sign up through the WorkSafe Tasmania website so that you can find out all the great information about what we're doing with the program. Thank you very much.